Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. So, will we ever go back to normal ever again? I bet this is the question top of mind for most, if not all, Canadians. As more jurisdictions in the country lock down, and most for a third time, and schools in many provinces like Quebec and Ontario closed yet again, we are left wondering what the way out of this will look like. Well, for researchers at Stanford University in California, they have developed a potential game changer, a platform for a rapid PCR test that fits in the palm of your hand and can give you a result with 99% accuracy in 30 minutes. And the FDA in the US just approved it for use. So what impact will a test like this have on the reopening of our economy, on everyday life? Will Canada approve this test as well? Well, joining me now to discuss this new test is David Robinson, Executive Director of Techknowledgey Group. David, thank you so much for joining me. I was really excited when I heard about this test. Again, this is going to be quite the game changer potentially for Canada. But first, please tell me about this test and why it's so different than everything else on the market right now.
Well, Tanya, I appreciate the opportunity to give you and your viewers a fast skate over the surface of an iceberg of detailed information here. This is what you get when you take some of the smartest medical minds on the planet, give them 7 years and $300 million. So what this is a PCR test. Very important. It's not an antigen test. This is a PCR test. This is as similar to the days when they took an IBM mainframe computer and shrunk it down to a personal computer. A hospital laboratory PCR system, a multi-million-dollar system, has been shrunk down to the size of a deck of cards in the palm of your hand, and it can give anyone, anywhere, a PCR. In this particular case, it's for COVID-19, result in 30 minutes. What's important to understand is the test platform that I'm showing you here is capable of testing for any infectious disease pathogen. This particular version of it happens to be for COVID-19. The first versions that were developed long before COVID came along were actually for STDs. So you can actually have this type of testing for all kinds of different pathogens. So The COVID-19 version that I'm showing you here was approved by the FDA in February 2021 for point of care use, which means that any nurse, any trained operator or physician could use this throughout the US. Early adopters of this are the NBA Basketball League, the US Department of Defense. You can currently be tested at LAX Airport, Terminal 6 with Clarity Labs, tested just a few hours before your flight with a PCR test. Also, hospitals are using this to test parents going in to visit their children in cancer care.
Wow. So this clearly has, can I say, rapidly changed things? Excuse the pun. So for the hospital level test, in Canada, we're used to, if you're going for a test, you have to book it online, sometimes days in advance, sometimes long waits, sometimes not so long waits. But, for the most part, it's been kind of, a bumpy road, shall we say. The technology there in the hospital, how much does something like that, the testing capacity at a hospital, if they want the larger geared up version of this, how much would something like that cost?
Well, it depends on the size, but there's lots of manufacturers that make large hospital PCR systems. It's in the millions of dollars. Has to be run by technicians, also uses specialized reagents and specialized parts. So you have some supply chain challenges, which we've seen happen during the pandemic where there was a shortage of certain reagents. There's also what we call instrument-based point of care PCR systems. And you might be familiar with the Abbott ID Now system, or in Canada, they had a product called the Spartan system. Unfortunately, they recently went into creditor protection with some deficiencies in their testing technology. These are small instruments about the size of a toaster that might cost in the range of, say, $20,000, run by a technician. They use some specialized parts. They're also capable of being done at the point of care. So they're good, but you can often only do one test in an hour or one test in half an hour. So they're not particularly scalable. And again, you need a technician, they're expensive, and they have some dependencies on supply chain.
Whereas this one, so how much would this test hit the market for? Again, it's not available for public consumption yet, maybe, perhaps in the future in the United States. We'll see what happens in Canada in a moment. But so how much would this testing kit cost, or this device?
Well, it is actually commercially available in the United States right now. They're manufacturing around 50 to 100,000 units a month. Price range is around $200 US at this point. And this product has been designed to be an over-the-counter product. So
Okay.
with the appropriate regulatory approvals, which take some time, you can expect it to be over-the-counter before the end of 2021.
Okay, we're going to pick up this discussion right when we return. Welcome back. We're discussing a new, smaller, much more affordable PCR test. It's a rapid PCR test. In that, you can get a result in half an hour, and it fits in the palm of your hand. And joining me is David Robinson, Executive Director of Techknowlegey Group. David, just before the break, we were discussing, the scale of this unit, how much it would cost. So it's so much more affordable than anything anybody could ever get. Not that we ever could get that hospital unit. But that aside, tell me, how does the test work? Does one still have to insert a very large Q-tip way up into the nose, or is this going to be a more user-friendly experience, shall we say?
It's a little more user-friendly. You're referring to the nasopharyngeal swab, which we've all sort of seen and some of us have experienced. It's a bit uncomfortable, and it has to go quite far back up to get the sample. This device is designed for a mid-turbinate nasal swab, so you essentially take a sort of a Q-tip, if you will, and swirl it around 5 times in one nostril, 5 times in the other nostril, put it in the buffer solution, and put it into the receptacle here. Click it shut, press button 1, 2, 3, plug it in and wait for half an hour. And the result is shown here very much like a lady's pregnancy test, where it has 1 bar for the control to show that the process has gone through successfully. And if it's 2 bars, unfortunately, that means COVID was in the sample.
Wow. So again, because this again gives you a result in 30 minutes, and one could even test themselves if they were keen to in their own home if you purchased a unit. How could this change the lockdown situation in which we're suffering so dearly here in Canada?
Well, it has tremendous applicability in many different areas to get us back on a path to resuming air travel and business and social and economic activity. I mentioned earlier that you can be tested at Terminal 6 at LAX right now, and you can fly from LAX to Canada with this test qualifying you for your flight. But surprisingly enough, you can't fly from Canada back to LAX because the test hasn't been approved here in Canada yet. And the benefits here would be quite remarkable. So if I'm tested in LAX and I fly to Canada, I land in Canada with a PCR test result that's less than 6 hours old.
Right.
Surprisingly enough, in Canada, that is completely disregarded. You're invited to be incarcerated in a hotel for 3 days while you await a delayed laboratory PCR test here. It really is unnecessary. That could be eliminated immediately. And that would dramatically allow people to have a PCR test, so very safe confirmation of their health status, by the time they pick up their baggage from the luggage carousel. So that's one very simple application.
I was hearing your words about how this test would not be, for example, accepted here, and the tremendous inconvenience, financial, physical, everything that you have to experience when you return to Canada, stay in a quarantine hotel or whatever they call those facilities now. It's quite burdensome, really. I mean, when we think of, and I'm sorry, this is my little rant here for a moment, but when you think of the delays to get vaccines to Canada, the fact that we haven't yet approved something like this, it's not yet available. I mean, America's our neighbor south of the border. We're just a thin line away. How can we not be up to par with our American cousins? I'm surprised we're still lagging both in the vaccine procurement race and in the PCR testing race. So I guess my question is, so are we on the path to at least getting this approved here in Canada? This sounds amazing.
Well, let me outline some of the bureaucratic obstacles here in Canada. And it's unfortunate that we have people within the government of Canada that are doing just a tremendous job to help to attract this to the country. And we have a lot of help from the consulate in San Francisco and folks with the Medical Devices Directorate at Health Canada, and within Industry, Science and Innovation Canada, they actually have the mandate for addressing gaps in our domestic manufacturing capability for things like tests and PPE and ventilators and vaccines and so on. But there are also other silos within government that have bureaucratic authority over certain small things that completely impede the efforts of these elements of the government. So, for example, in this particular case, just to allow the people to fly up here from Silicon Valley. Now, remember, these are the leading infectious disease physicians on planet Earth. This is the medical faculty of Stanford University. And we applied through the appropriate processes with assistance from the departments I mentioned to you. And the Public Health Agency of Canada said, nope, no border entry and quarantine exemption for these people. So we cannot even fly them up to Canada to do the clinical demonstration, which is required to apply for Health Canada approval. Now, what's important to understand here is that this is already approved by the FDA as a medical device. It's capable of being used. There's no question about the functionality of the device.
Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion on this new VISB test, if you will, this rapid, not a rapid, it's a 30-minute PCR test that fits in the palm of your hand. And joining me is David Robinson, Executive Director of Techknowlegey Group. Again, David, hold up the unit just so our viewers can see if they didn't see it for the first two segments. But this is incredibly small, very affordable. It's been FDA approved, aka it's been approved in America, in the United States. Not approved in Canada, and you were outlining some of the obstacles of just getting this approved here. So hopefully this will be approved soon, and then what can we expect? What kind of applications, further applications can we expect from a unit like this?
So it has utility as a medical device. So if I wanted to test one person for their COVID status and prescribe a drug, you could do that. But you can also do what's being used in the US is doing testing on groups of people who don't have any symptoms. They just want to get on a plane or get into work. And you can actually take samples from up to 10 people and put them in the device and get a result. And if it's good to go, all 10 are good to go. So a tremendous opportunity for increasing scale and reducing cost factors.
So how would that work? How would you sample 10 persons simultaneously?
Well, they're lined up to get on board a plane.
Right.
And you sample them in the hour before they get on board the plane.
And you just put like 10 samples in the same unit?
Yeah, you gather the sample from each person and you can do either a sample pooling or swab pooling. So it's either you take a separate sample from everyone and then combine those, or you take swabs, put them all together and insert that into the device.
Okay, and then this group is free to go. They can board the flight. Okay, what other applications, say for dining in or dining out, this could be something perhaps restaurants might want to use?
So there's another more elegant approach that you could use. Now, remember, you're going to be required to be tested if you want to get on a plane. You may be required to be tested at your workplace. But wouldn't it be nice if the test result could be used by the visitor economy, by restaurants and conventions, so that if that result was up in a blockchain registry in the cloud, something as simple as a green check mark or a red circle and the time that it was done. So no medical information, nothing that impairs or imposes on the privacy of the individual, but you have that available in the cloud. It's absolutely assured, can't be tampered with, and you put a QR code on the person's phone. They could go into a restaurant, it could be scanned at no cost to the restaurant, and they could confirm your test status in a way that allows them to have a COVID-free zone within the restaurant.
Now, some persons might, some critics of something like this might say, well, why should I have to go through a COVID test? Why should I have to? I'm asymptomatic. I don't have any symptoms. Maybe I've had COVID and I will not have it again. Maybe it's a child. Why should a child have to go through this test to get to school? Is this a violation of our civil liberties?
I think there's an argument to be said that it can be a violation. There's always this tug of war between the interests of the individual and the society. And in our world, in our economy, it's a very global economy. For example, the tourism industry, we need people from outside our country to come into the country and participate and spend their money in the economy here. We want to encourage that, but we want that to be done safely. So there's always going to be a tug of war between these. And I think that's where government needs to have appropriate policies that balance those.
And perhaps for those who are vaccine cautious, who maybe don't want to get a vaccine, and we've seen something up towards 50% of, I think, even frontline healthcare workers are a little hesitant to get the vaccine. Perhaps they'd be more comfortable having one of these tests done, or a PCR test done that can be done quickly prior to entering, say, their workplace or something like that, rather than get a vaccine. So it does provide perhaps an extra lane for those who want to still access certain things but definitely don't want to have a vaccine. And again, with all the talk of vaccine passports, people are a little on edge these days, and I don't blame them.
Well, I think we're going to have a world that has both vaccination and testing in it going forward. As you said, there are many people who would not want to be vaccinated. We want to have some way for them to be able to conduct affairs safely. Let's say there's an entire family that doesn't want to be vaccinated or would have some exposure to an adverse reaction if they were. Well, they can use testing to make sure that they're protected and their elderly grandparents and their immune compromised members are not going to be exposed to risk, and it doesn't have to compromise their decision about being vaccinated or not.
Right. It's definitely an interesting device, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this when in a few minutes when we come back from our commercial break. One thing I found interesting is that, as you mentioned, it can test for a whole variety of things. Right now, it's just keyed to test for COVID-19, but it could have other and greater testing capabilities. So, if you're a mother and you want to have a play date and you want to make sure that someone's not bringing over their flu-ridden child, for example, you can swab them before they enter your home and have a safe environment even. That might be one step too far, but who knows where this could go. Welcome back. We're wrapping up our discussion with David Robinson, Executive Director of Techknowledgey Group, who has with him one of these new VISB medical testing kits that test for COVID-19. It fits in the palm of your hands. It's available for about $200 US, but not available in Canada because it hasn't yet been approved. And it gives you a result with a 99% accuracy in 30 minutes, which is a game changer for those who want quick testing. David, before commercial, in the last segment, we were discussing some of the roadblocks that have presented themselves in the path to getting this test approved here in Canada. Again, it's approved in the United States. It's been in use for point of care testing in the United States. Why not in Canada? And just before you answer, my concern is that some of our viewers watching this segment, this program, who are sitting in their homes at a stay-at-home order, locked down and told not to go anywhere or socialize, might look at that test and say, hey, if we had that test here today, I wouldn't be forced to sit in my living room all day long. I want to go out there where the rest of the people should be. So tell us, what are the next steps and how should the government be proactively handling this response with this test, for example, with COVID?
Let me wrap it in a bit of a metaphor here. So COVID-19 is caused by a virus, but the COVID-19 pandemic is caused by a lack of information. And it's a very simple question. Is this person infectious? And if you can't answer that question, you have to treat everyone as though they're potentially infectious. Of course, that's where lockdowns and all the unfortunate economic consequences flow from. So what we have here are two different battles we're fighting. One is a medical battle and one is an economic battle. Now, the metaphor is this. Back in World War II, we had the same situation, a war on two fronts. And of course, you fight the war with the weapons you have, guns and tanks and bombs, but you also have a strategic initiative, a Manhattan Project. And that strategic initiative, of course, taking an innovation and finding out how to apply it, proved to be extremely significant in determining the outcome of that conflict. So here we have a similar situation. Of course, we've got to fight the war on one front with the tools that we have available, vaccines and contact tracing and so on. But we also need a strategic initiative, a Manhattan Project. And one thing that would be very helpful here, if we were able to get that type of thinking around this solution, is to have a minister within the federal government who is the minister of making it happen, the one who is able to see these sort of conflicting bureaucratic obstacles between different silos within the government and resolve them and take the strategic overview here. It's almost unconscionable that the leading infectious disease physicians on the planet are not permitted to fly to Canada to do the clinical demonstration. We actually have an air carrier who's offered to host it here in Canada, and we're unable to proceed because of this bureaucratic obstacle at the Public Health Agency of Canada.
It's just hearing you say those words, it's just so disturbing to me. We've got to do better. I mean, isn't this an emergency situation? Shouldn't we have all hands on deck, and shouldn't we be able to pull whatever resources possible? I mean, think of how many civil liberties we've had violated just to deal with these lockdowns and to try to contain a virus that I'm not sure is containable. But yet we cannot violate or change one little tiny rule so that we can fly over these infectious diseases experts to present to us their, state-of-the-art tests. It sounds crazy to me, but I believe you, and I'm hoping that there will be a good path forward. So in the next 45 seconds or that we have left before we have to sign off, do you have hope that we will be able to approve this very soon?
Well, hope is not a plan, but there's a great First Nations saying that hope is like a way through the trees. And as more people share it, it becomes the path out of the forest. And that's really what this is at this point. This is a very hopeful pathway forward to a very practical solution to get us back towards at least accelerating the resumption of air travel and business and social and economic activity. We can't just freeze in the minefield. We need to start to make our way out of that minefield. And this might be a little bit of a shimmering mirage of innovation and policy on the horizon, but let's point ourselves that way and let's get a Manhattan Project coordinated and move towards it.
Okay, David, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Best wishes. Well, even though some of us might be skeptical about having something swabbed up our nose with a typical PCR test, this one seems a little bit gentler and definitely produces a more accurate result and faster. So why wouldn't we go this route if it would help us open up our economy? Well, regardless of where you stand on mandatory PCR testing, this might be the key that Canada has been looking for to unlocking our economy. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.